morning. Welcome to the First Universalist Unitarian Church. My name is 𝗖𝗵𝗂𝗏, and I am a member of this congregation. Did you know that today is the autumnal equinox? This is the day that the sun is exactly above the equator and day and night are of equal length. As I spent some time reading and thinking about the autumnal equinox last night and this morning, I noticed these words were used to describe this phase over and over again: balance, gratitude, reflection, harvest, growth, promise. Those fit First UU pretty well, I think. Since 1858, 𝗖𝗵𝗂𝗏 has served as a vital voice for liberal religion in central Wisconsin. We are an intentionally free society that welcomes all people just as you are, regardless of age, sexual orientation, ethnicity, or economic situation. Wherever you are on life's journey, you are welcome here. I want to extend a special welcome to any visitors joining us this morning. After service, please join us for refreshments, and there are a lot. I was just checking it out. And Carolyn, our membership coordinator, will be available for tours or to answer any questions you may have. Between Sundays, we'd love to have everyone at our classes or events, so be sure to subscribe to the church's newsletter and follow us on Facebook or Instagram for updates. I do have a few announcements that I want to draw your attention to. Are you new to First 𝗖𝗵𝗂𝗏? Welcome. If you are interested in learning more about us or becoming a member, please contact Carolyn Powers, our membership coordinator. If you'd like to volunteer as an usher or worship associate, this very job, please reach out to the church's office. We'll connect you with the right person to help get you more involved in the church community. Help save lives and get rewarded. Give blood here on Tuesday, September 24th between 10 a.m. and 3 p.m., and you'll receive a $15 e-gift card to the merchant of your choice. The Men's Soul Matters group is entering its second year and is now open to new members starting in September. After September, the group will once again be closed. The UU Men's Group uses the Soul Matters curriculum to offer participants the gifts of a deeper connection to ourselves, others, and life through individual reflection, spiritual practice, and the practice of deep listening. Want to join? Please notify Brian Mason or Jerry Phelan. Feel free to show up on September 26th at 6:30 p.m. to kick the tires if you're not sure if it's for you. Lastly, you may have heard on the news that Marty and Jim Harris are having to put the Hmong Museum in storage and are in critical need of towels, sheets, and pillowcases for packing this week. If you need more information about how to help with this, please see Sue Miller during coffee hour. And Sue, will you stand up or raise your hand? Here she is. She'd be the one to contact. Thank you. As we begin our worship together, let us take a moment to extend peace and blessing to one another. Please rise and greet your neighbors.
Technical difficulties. Yeah, I'm gonna light the chalice so you're good.
Okay. Dear friends, let us gather our hearts and minds for worship. Please join me in reciting the chalice lighting in your order of worship. We light this chalice for the light of truth, the warmth of love, and the fire of commitment. we light this symbol of our faith as we gather together. Please rise and body your spirit for our opening hymn, Gather the Spirit, number 347 in your gray hymnal.
This morning, our Time for All Ages is being led by Rowan, they, he.
Give me a second, my mic's fighting me. Today's story is If You Plant a Seed, words and painting by Kadir Nelson. If you plant a tomato seed, a carrot seed, and a cabbage seed, in time, with love and care, a tomato, cabbage, and carrot plant will grow. If you plant a seed of selfishness in very short time, it will grow and grow and grow into a heap of trouble. But if you plant to seed kindness, in almost no time at all, the fruits of kindness will grow and grow and grow. And they are very, very sweet. The end.
Thank you, Rowan. This morning, our children in preschool through 5th grade are invited downstairs for our children's RE group. Youth are invited to join their families for worship. Youth group will be back next Sunday. And whether you are remaining in the sanctuary or heading off to RE, I invite you to bless everyone here with our children's song. The words are printed in your order of worship.
So, a time that I'd like to invite everyone to join me in a spirit of prayer and meditation. This is a time in the service that we set aside for quiet and contemplation. So I ask you to find a nice, comfortable position in your pew. And cross your legs if you'd like. Put your feet flat and firm on the ground. And together, we will take a couple of full and deep breaths. But first, relax your shoulders. And with this next breath, breathe it full and into your stomach. Hold it for just a moment, and slowly out. And with your next breath, deep and full up into your chest, and hold it, and slowly out. And let us pray. Spirit of life, we know our help comes from you. But sometimes we find it hard to understand how you can be among us and around us and within us, and still yet there seems to be so much pain and sorrow in our world. We see so many broken promises. We see so much pent-up anger, so many people betrayed. And we long for healing for those around us whose lives are burdened by poverty and disease. For all those people in places where anger flares, violence and war. And we also long for healing for ourselves, for we know all too well how we contribute to the pain around us. Oh, Holy Love, help us to speak truth to power. Hear now our prayers for those in need and for ourselves. Help us to be the salt of the earth, humble and faithful. We offer our prayers for those in pain and need by raising them within the silence of our hearts. And now let us call to mind all the joys and sorrows in our lives, and let us meditate on them in silence together now. Amen. Please stay seated and open your gray hymnal to 108. My heart flows on, an endless song.
The offering that we take each Sunday isn't just a stale habit. It's an opportunity to recommit to this place and to this people. Our offering is an affirmation, a yes. When we give, we say yes to something we value, the mission and ministry of 𝗖𝗄𝗧𝗧. Our mission is made possible by the generous support of its friends and members. With our gifts freely given, may we say yes to the values of our faith. May our offering help us practice Unitarian Universalism within and beyond our congregation as tools to empower our mission. You can place a gift in the donation plate as it passes by. You can also visit our website, 𝗖𝗵𝘂𝗿𝗁.org, to make a one-time or recurring gift with your credit or debit card. Thank you for your support.
This morning's reading, to get us in the mind of the sermon, I have two sections from James Baldwin's wonderful book, The Fire Next Time. Baldwin writes, I imagine one of the reasons people cling to their hate so stubbornly is because they sense that once their hate is gone, they'll be forced to deal with their pain. But life is tragic simply because the earth turns and the sun inexorably rises and sets, and one day for each of us, the sun will go down for the last time. Perhaps the whole root of our trouble, the human trouble, is that we will sacrifice all the beauty of our lives. We will imprison ourselves in totems, taboos, crosses, blood sacrifices, steeples, mosques, races, armies, flags, nations, in order to deny the fact of death, the only fact we have. It seems to me that one ought to rejoice in the fact of death, ought to decide indeed to earn one's death by confronting with passion the conundrum of life, because one is responsible for life. It is the small beacon in that terrifying darkness from which we come and to which we shall return. What we learn in life is that love takes off masks that we fear we cannot live without and know we cannot live within. I use the word love here not merely in the personal sense, but as a state of being or a state of grace. Not in the infantile American sense of being made happy, but in the tough and universal sense of quest and daring and growth. Therein ends our reading. I'm going to ad lib a minute, mainly because I now wear bifocals, and this is the first time I've had to read a sermon using my bifocals, so I'm just going to make this sermon up to get us started. Do any of you read the Modern Love column in New York Times? A couple of you are nodding your head. Well, in reading Baldwin's entry from the book that I read this morning, it made me think of this week's edition of Modern Love. And the question sort of about, like, what do you do when that thing that you're so hung up with goes away? What's the thing that when you're addicted to goes away and you don't have it anymore, what do you do? Anyways, the letter writer for the Modern Love column was, for this week, is a woman who got sober, and she's been sober for about 6 months. And she talks about how she still wanted to stay connected with these group of friends. And so for the first time in 6 months of being sober, she went to the bar. And she went back to the same little corner that she had always drank and had lots and lots of conversations with her friends. And she said it was about 12 minutes into the conversation when the pleasantries were over, when the updates on what's going on with her life is over, that she realized, I don't really know what I have to talk about anymore. She had to discover who she was, sort of in real time, face to face with someone you love. And I think about that when I think about James Baldwin's section from the book that I read this morning. If you take away all your hates, if you take away all the things that drive you, all those negative motivators, and I can't speak for you, but I can tell you what, I am driven by a lot of negative emotions from time to time. I know all the politicians I disagree with, so on and so on. So that's the question I want us to keep in mind this morning as we think about this topic. And so go back in time with me to set us up for as we're going to engage this. And remember from the history books that a long time ago, or maybe not that long ago, Martin Luther King famously said that Sunday mornings in America is the most segregated hour. And since then, it's undeniable, of course, progress has been made, but only some progress, most of it in the racial sense. But the reality is, Sunday morning remains one of America's most segregated hours, still racially to a startling degree, but also, and this is relatively new, it remains segregated politically as well. So what we're learning today, whenever we reach out to people like you, people like me, and we ask them this question, we're finding out that many of us choose a church based on how that church aligns with our political beliefs. We don't care what they say about the Bible, anything like that. We don't care what it says about religious texts. We want to know, do they agree with me politically? And so it goes that when the person in the pew agrees with the preacher's or the president's politics, there's very little said about the mixture of politics and faith. But when we disagree, or when a congregant hears something that they disagree with that I've said, I can tell you from experience that people cry foul. And despite the separation of church and state, I think there will always be a connection between faith and politics. In fact, I wouldn't want to live in a world where everyone is expected to separate the two, and I don't even know if that's actually possible. For me, faith is something like a forge in my heart, to make a metaphor. Faith is a forge in my heart, and it helps me hammer out answers to life's most important questions, and some of those questions are political ones. But I also know that people who arrive at different conclusions than me, different conclusions about things like abortion or gun control and immigration, they have taken those very same issues to the forge of faith in their hearts, and they've arrived at a conclusion. So back in the Civil War, Abraham Lincoln was the first American statesman to publicly admit that enemies on the other side, they pray to the same God as people in the Union. So there's this wonderful story, and it takes place just a little bit after a very significant Union defeat. And back in those days, when you went to the White House, you could actually stumble on the president. You don't do that any day, or today. And so it's after a major Union defeat, and a visitor to the White House, she sees Abraham Lincoln across the way, and she rushes over to him to assure him after this major defeat, and she says, "President Lincoln, God is still on your side." And this is what they wrote down that Lincoln said in response. He shot back to this woman, he said, "Ma'am, I can try to be on God's side, but I must not presume that God is on my side." And yet he often condemned slavery expressly for religious reasons, illustrating the tension between faith and politics. And so throughout history, religion has been a powerful force for change. In critical moments, it was people's faith that pushed them out of their complacency and revealing what truly matters. It motivated people to act. And none of the founders made a clearer connection between God's law and our duty to create an equal society than Thomas Jefferson. And Thomas Jefferson is the person who enshrined equality in the Declaration of Independence. And mind you, he enshrined it in the Declaration of Independence as slaves tended his garden. But this connection, to use Jefferson's words, is self-evident. Every enfleshed soul deserves a chance to make a life freely, with hope for happiness, because that's what the Creator wanted when she formed us out of the earth. And yet throughout history, people have tried to manipulate this for their own agenda. We have examples today like Christian nationalism, slavery, and neoliberalism, to name a few. And there are other people out there who think it's their job to interpret tragedies as God's punishment for our nation's collective godlessness. There's no shortage of people who claim to speak for God or for humankind. And far too many churches have allowed charlatans into their pulpit because they're too eager to seek relevance rather than righteousness. But I think that this is a distortion of the church's true role. The church is meant to stand in judgment of political power, at least on paper. The church is not meant to serve political power. We have wonderful examples like Martin Luther King, Dietrich Bonhoeffer, 𝗖𝗵𝗂 𝗍𝗶, and others like them who show us the true cost of what it takes to always hold this line. And here in this church, we know that our history has people like that, people who serve as wonderful examples. But we also know that we have people in this church who claimed to speak for God. And of course they didn't. Knowing these stories is part of what helps us know the difference between real faith and self-interest. Because real faith is always more compassionate than our human emotions and political divides can handle. So I was trying to think of an illustrative story about this, and I decided to use a really old one because I think it really works. So I want you to consider the prophet Elijah. And so Elijah is this Old Testament guy who saw everyone other than himself and everyone other than the people who agreed with him and his friends as corrupt, lazy, and dumb. Does this sound familiar? It should. So in his day, if you can get this, I can't believe this, I'm scandalized when I familiarize myself with this story again. In his day, most of the nation's wealth was controlled by a few mega-rich people at the top of the social pyramid. Can you imagine such a thing, people? I can't believe we have to talk about this. Anyways, these people, they were destroying fields and valleys for nothing more than a handful of gold. And so Elijah was beside himself. He wanted God to put them in their place. And whenever Elijah prayed, he was a good little boy, he said, "Dear God, please bring these people to their knees." That's what he said. And yet the response that Elijah gets is never the response that he wants. He doesn't get a divine decree to destroy. He doesn't get sanctified sanctions to slap. He doesn't get a holy handshake to hit. He's told this. He says, "Justice comes from gentleness." He said, "Elijah, calm down." He's told to listen to that still, small voice that's in all of us, that's too often ignored. And then get ready for the mic drop. He's told that real faith isn't knowing what's right. It's having love for those who even seem to be opposed to righteousness. When people today are asked what they want to happen to people they disagree with politically, what poll after poll after poll tells us is what we say. We say we want the people we disagree with silenced, just like Elijah. For us, disagreement has become a poison. It's a poison that destroys school boards and friendships and families. It ruins perfectly good dinner parties. And if you're like me, you can rattle off 25 things about politics that annoy you in 10 seconds or less. I did it this morning. I'm good at it. But it is against this tendency that the church stands. The church is meant to stand in contrast, to remind us that any container you try and use to bottle up God or bottle up the truth, that container will always shatter. Just think about the stories of Prometheus and his fire, or Pandora's box, or Jonah and the whale, Moses striking the rock. They're tales that we have been telling one another since the only light at night was the stars above us. And the reason why we keep telling these stories is because they warn us that divine power, like the church's real power, is not supposed to be like Burger King. We are not meant to have it your way. But somewhere along the way, we bought or we were sold the idea that God is chiefly interested in religion, and specifically the religion of me and mine. We believe that God's home was the church, that God's people knew who they were, and that the world was a barren place full of lost souls in need of all the help they could get. And plenty of us seize on those ideas because they offer us meaning, and they help us keep our enemies. And we did this believing that this kind of stuff gives us purpose. Think about James Baldwin's words. It gives us something to do in the midst of lives that might otherwise be invisible. When you're angry, you feel powerful. The problem is, many of the people in need of saving are the people in churches. And what many of those people need saving from, at least in part, is the idea that God sees the world like they do. And this issue extends to atheists and agnostics as well. People who are not immune to believing that they have some kind of a monopoly on truth and dismissing complexity or belief altogether. In the Hindu text, the Upanishads, God is described like this: "Thou before whom all words recoil." The message is clear. Nobody speaks for the holy. But even if we accept this, we still have to answer the question, what does it mean to be religious? I think about this question all the time. And I remember just a couple of years ago, I heard someone describe a friend of theirs as this. They said, "This friend of mine is a renovator of souls." Wouldn't you love to be called that? I think what he meant by this is someone who understands that discovering who we are is a lifelong journey of growth and change. And I mention this because I worry that too many churches have stopped doing soul renovation. We've sold out to hateful rhetoric. We're scared of ruffling feathers, and so we let a lot of nonsense weigh us down. And I wonder if somewhere along the way we've lost the nerve to live in mystery and ask questions that aren't easily answered. That people today choose churches based on how well they align with their political beliefs, I think this is totally understandable. After all, how do politicians speak? It's always uncertainties, right? But if we're all honest, we know that politicians write a lot of checks that they will never cash. And there is a lot of life that happens outside of the ballot box. And if we're honest, what the church gives us among all those complicated histories and buildings that we can barely afford to keep upright these days, what the church gives us are songs of liberation. They give us a declaration of power. They give us a declaration of love, that justice, that order, that the Creator who endowed us with the inalienable rights of life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, they ain't always what we say it is. What the church has always given us is paradox. The paradoxes that go like this: wisdom and foolishness, strength and weakness, self-sacrifice. Rattling around the walls of this church since 1858, these words have been spoken. Greater hath no person than this, than to lay down their life for a friend. If you showed up the next Sunday, you would have probably heard this: love your enemy. Next Sunday, pray for people who persecute you. I'll fully admit that those words will never help make you thinner. They will not make you richer. They will not make you stronger. They will not make you sexier. And they will certainly not win elections. But I do know what they do. They will help make us kinder and braver and more tolerant of our inevitable imperfections. But these lessons go further. They dare you to live as though the worst that can happen to us is never the last word. It's never the last word because we believe, we're taught, that there is a love at work in the world that almost everyone tries to copy in our own small ways. It's a love that we're dared to believe that never leaves, it never gives up, it's never defeated. And it's into this love that we proclaim, that we baptize children, that we join couples in marriage, when we call one another into covenant, and whenever we bless the dead. At the end of his life, Martin Luther King said this. He said, "The church is not the master or the servant of the state, but rather the conscience." What he's telling us is that the church stands in judgment of politics. And the thing about the conscience of the church is that it's up to all of you. You get to decide what it is. The hate we all want the church separate from, it isn't only at the political rally you would rather get a flat tire than attend. It's not only at the church down the street or across the street. It's not just in red states or blue states. The fight against this hate is in all of us. The other day I heard someone say that many of us, in our fight for freedom, rather than fighting for freedom, what we've done instead is we've decided to put on a uniform. And the uniform we often reach for is the uniform of protester, activist, marcher, voter, firebrand, impeacher, lobbyist, soldier, champion, expert, and critic. But the freedom we're fighting for is a freedom we've forgotten how to identify. Because if freedom is reduced to whatever I want, then freedom is nothing more than tyranny in disguise. And if the church is reduced to just what you want, the church is nothing more than tyranny in disguise. I'm going to end this sermon personally. I've been this church's pastor for about 8 years, and I've learned a lot of profound lessons along the way. I never learn any lessons suddenly or in some great spark of inspiration. I'm a very, very slow learner. And how I learned it slowly is by paying attention to the people and the personalities in this church, some of whom are wonderful and entertaining, and some of whom, anyways. But I paid attention to the personalities in this church, especially the ones who seem to believe that a prerequisite for being a full, kind, and wise human being involves this: performing a series of small but concrete actions over and over again. This is what I learned from people in this church. Be curious about other people. Try and disagree without destroying relationships. Always be vulnerable when it's needed. Be a good listener. Know how to ask for and offer forgiveness. Know how to host a gathering where everyone feels welcome. Know how to see things from another person's point of view and knowing when enough is enough. What we hear from people all around this country in every poll that we take is that people long for connection. There isn't a person that doesn't want to love and be loved. They want to be accepted. They want to feel accepted. They want to know that they're the object of your attention. And that is this church's calling. And it is an immortal calling, but it isn't guaranteed. Because the separation of church and hate it starts in us. The true measure of faith, it doesn't lie in our politics, but in our capacity for love and understanding. In a world that often divides us, we're called to be soul renovators. We're called to be bridge builders, people who embrace complexity, people who honor difference, and live as a testament to the belief that every soul, regardless of their background, is worthy of love and respect and happiness. And so I'll say it one last time. The separation of church and hate, it starts in us. My prayer is that this compassion grows in us and that it guides our actions. So may it be, and amen. If you would, I invite you now to rise in spirit or body and open your books to 163 for our opening hymn, For the Earth Forever Turning. If you'll receive these blessing words, I invite you to reach out with your heart. If you're here with someone, reach out and take their hand. May the truth that sets us free, and the hope that never dies, and the love that casts out fear lead us forward together until the day spring breaks and all shadows flee away. I invite you to sit down, relax, and enjoy the postlude, and join us in just a moment for refreshments.